At 50 years old, this homebody woman spends her days playing video games at home. Suddenly, a plainclothes man sneaks into her drink. She takes a sip, surprised to find pulp in it, and her mood instantly improves. Just as she is about to break a world record in her game, her fun is suddenly interrupted from behind. In that moment, grabbing a wine bottle, she charges forward, but in the next second, she's dragged away. The woman's name is Inspector Coup. Don't be fooled by her appearance. Though she seems ordinary, she's actually a top-level detective, one of the best. She has been living on an island where, outside a place called Piao Women City, a man named Gun Wook recently died under mysterious circumstances. From the scene, it looked like Gun Wook had been murdered. By agreement, Inspector Coup was assigned to investigate for 12 months. To prevent her from being trapped alone, her second sister asked Ji to assist her. Ji told Inspector Coup to find a teammate from her online games, and she chose one named Chen Mo. Chen Mo was quiet, scarred, but reliable. They worked well together and quickly reached the island. Through interviews, they learned that Gun Wook and his wife lived peacefully, well off, except that their daughter had diabetes, which wasn't life-threatening, so there was no reason for suicide. Meanwhile, strange things were happening at Gun Wook's factory. Within 1 year, 5 people had died there, 2 accidents, 1 heart attack, 1 suicide, and finally, Gun Wook disappeared. The only thing these people had in common was that they had all attended a game party 1 year earlier. Ji Hee's investigation revealed that although Gun Wook had gone missing, his phone suddenly powered on 3 months ago. Tracking the signal, she arrived at a hidden street. Pretending to be a customer, she asked the shopkeeper if he had seen Gun Wook. The shopkeeper only recalled that 3 months ago, a strange group of guests came in, all covering their faces. And that date coincided exactly with the phone's signal. Digging deeper, she learned that at that same game party a year ago, a boy drowned. Rumor had it that 5 people witnessed it but did nothing to save him. Since then, they were said to be cursed by the boy's vengeful spirit. The next day, Inspector Coup visited Gun Wook's wife, but noticed the car was full of snacks. For someone with diabetes, such an amount didn't make sense. It hinted that Gun Wook might still be alive, hidden somewhere. Sneaking into their home, she found a walkie-talkie on the table. From it came the impatient voice of a man, urging his wife to bring him more wine and food. Since walkie-talkies only work within 50 meters, it meant Gun Wook was hiding nearby. Inspector Coup and Chen Mo began a careful search, and soon, inside an abandoned shipping container, they found another walkie-talkie. It turned out Gun Wook had staged his disappearance to collect insurance money, hiding in a pollen pit. But then, rocks suddenly rolled down from the mountain, causing the pit to collapse. Trapped in the stench, he suffocated to death. From afar, a girl with binoculars watched with excitement. She was the one who had loosened the rocks on purpose. Afterward, she returned to the container, erased evidence, set off an explosion, and left with a smile, going home to sleep. At 40 years old, Inspector Coup, disguised as a 50-year-old policewoman, knew all of this could not be a coincidence. Inspector Coup tracked down Gun Wook's wife and realized she was an accomplice in her husband's death. The wife hesitated at first, then suddenly collapsed in tears, confirming that Coup's deduction was correct. At the ghost party, 5 people had ignored the drowning boy. Someone had borne witness and decided to punish them. The killer sabotaged cars, tampered with brake systems, poisoned drinks, and staged suicides. The methods were clever and meticulous, far beyond the reach of an amateur. Gun Wook, desperate to escape the curse, faked his death to claim insurance money and planned to leave with his family. But one day, his wife received an anonymous message. She discovered that while their daughter was gravely ill, Gun Wook had sneaked out, almost exposing his identity. They quarreled violently, and in that moment she decided to cooperate with the stranger behind the messages, to truly kill Gun Wook. Since there was no direct evidence, Inspector Coup let the wife go. Meanwhile, the real killer had already returned to her secret lair. In her notebook were details of the murders, classic traits of a serial killer. She had hidden much of the incriminating evidence inside her handbag, then sunk it to the bottom of the river. In the end, Gun Wook still died. According to the arrangement, the insurance company paid out 600 million won, only half of what had been expected. Inspector Cou's mission was technically complete, though not perfectly. She returned to gaming. But then, she overheard one of her teammates speaking in despair, planning to commit suicide. Tracing the location, Coup rushed to stop him. She kicked away the blade in the boy's hand and led him outside. Inspector Coup then poured out her own story. Once, she had been a police officer for 50 years, but her amnesiac husband suddenly became a suspect in a case. Accused of murdering her husband, Inspector Coup confessed that she herself should have been the one to die. She then hurled herself into a garbage truck. Late that night, Inspector Coup crawled out from a heap of trash, startling the workers nearby. On the street, she tried to hail a cab. Drivers were terrified, thinking she was a ghost, and avoided her. Finally, she boarded another car. But before she could even state her destination, the driver sped off unnaturally fast. Sensing danger, she realized something was wrong. A man suddenly appeared, trapping her inside the car. Minutes later, the car arrived at a secluded building. The driver shoved her out with a key, almost as if mocking her for being filthy and inviting her to wash up. She went upstairs, where an older woman sat waiting in a bath. The woman mocked her about Gun Wook's case, hinting that all of it was the work of a manipulative killer who staged everything as coincidence. She introduced herself as the president of a foundation. Smiling, she told Inspector Coup, "You're more reliable than any cop. Help me catch the real killer, and I can give you resources and intelligence." Against her better judgment, Inspector Coup felt compelled to continue the pursuit. She insisted she needed no other teammates, though Chinemo was still loyally waiting downstairs. Watching Chinemo, rugged and dependable, Inspector Coup suddenly realized something. Last night, Chinemo had seen her dive into the garbage truck and thought she was dead. Shocked, he had searched through the trash all night. Back at home, while Inspector Coup slept, Chinemo had quietly done the housework. But there was something strange about him, an edge, a hidden past. He was no ordinary partner. The next day, Inspector Coup, her sister Ji, Chinemo, and a young man named Kong Chai formed a team. They organized case files, gathered intel, and even analyzed the killer's motives in detail. But just as they were piecing things together, another murder occurred. Moments later, a lady was dragged into the mountains. As memories resurfaced, husband and wife faced death together. When the car door opened, a girl stepped out, her expression blank. She had survived 30 days alone in the forest. When the 5-year-old girl's body was found, everyone called it a miracle, but her aunt said the child had been so frightened she remembered nothing. The girl's name was Snow. A child psychologist noticed Snow had scribbled over a photograph of her father until it was black. The doctor assumed it was childish mischief, but Snow insisted, "Daddy is a bad man. Bad people should be black." A week later, Snow witnessed something she couldn't understand. A man's pet dog had gone missing, and when it was found, the neighbor had already cooked it in a pot. The dog's owner knelt on the ground, inconsolable. The dog had been with him for 8 years. He called it family. Everyone else looked on with baffled faces, never having seen someone treat an animal like a relative. Watching the man weep, Snow asked her aunt why he was so sad. Her aunt brushed it off and said simply that the old man next door had done a bad thing. The next day, Snow slipped into the old man's house while he slept and set fire to his place. The old man burned to death. Nobody believed such an act could have been done by a 5-year-old. The incident was ultimately ruled an accidental blaze and the case closed. 12 years passed. Snow had grown into a striking young woman, lively, always smiling, outwardly no different from any high school girl. But no one knew that living inside her was a cold, methodical killer. One boy in her school was desperate enough to want to kill his father. The father drank all day, and the boy could no longer bear it. He couldn't bring himself to do it, until a girl stepped out from behind a curtain, smiling and asking whether he needed help. The boy nodded eagerly. The girl switched off the heart monitor, removed the oxygen mask, and tore at the tubing and dressings around the patient's mouth and nose. The man died quietly. The boy, terrified and awed, sobbed. The girl who had done it became a goddess in his eyes. Those small, hypnotic eyes etched themselves into his memory. A few days later, the boy found that girl at the school gate and followed her a long way. She spun around with panic, asking what he wanted. He stammered that he had the wrong person. Snow laughed and the boy knelt before her on the pavement, telling her he had once been saved from misery and now wanted to help punish the wicked. He swore he would do whatever she asked. Over the next few years, the two of them assassinated dozens of men who had escaped justice, every time staging the deaths to look like suicides. Their methods were flawless. Then Snow spotted a news item while having dinner with her aunt, a notorious hypocrite, a predator who had ruined many girls, driving some to attempt suicide, had been acquitted and set free. Her aunt seethed, calling him scum and saying he deserved to die. Captivated by the story, Snow immediately slipped into darkness and devised an impeccable plan. She turned to her aunt with a slight smile and said, "Leave your wish to me." Her aunt, fingers on her chin, replied with grudging pride that her niece had grown up, perhaps fit to become a cop. Little knowing the truth, she had no idea the small, harmless-looking girl already bore the weight of dozens of deaths. The target they chose was a man whose perverse habit was to film beneath women's skirts. He had hidden a tiny camera inside a drink bottle to capture whatever he needed, and his hat concealed a live-streaming setup that broadcast selections to paying viewers so they could choose victims. He believed his system made him untouchable, but he'd already made himself visible. Snow's team enacted a multi-stage trap. First, they engineered a small humiliation at a snack stall. The man, insisting on a refund when a server accidentally dropped his cup, forced an employee into a corner. The stall's fryer ran out of oil just as the food was being prepared. A delivery from Snow's crew supplied the cooking oil. The man ate happily, the first step complete. Next, a squad doused the cooking oil with a subtle chemical agent that, when combined with other elements, would incapacitate the victim. Finally, during a staged water balloon fight at a nearby gathering, a particular balloon, lined with another compound, struck the man on the head. The three components mixed in his body: the contaminated food, the gas from the soap, and the impact delivering the final agent. He slumped, frothing at the mouth, weak and unable to breathe. Snow filmed the entire sequence from a distance, steady behind her camera, as the man collapsed. In the end, those three common chemicals, combined by a meticulously planned chain of events, killed him. Snow was proud of her success, but then an unexpected scene played out on the giant public screens. A supposed victim appeared beside Lee Yu-hong's corpse, begging people to delete incriminating videos from the internet. When Lee Yu-hong, already long dead, did not respond, the girl broke down crying, pulled out a knife, and stabbed the man again and again. The crowd rushed in, witnessing her frenzy. Police quickly arrested the distraught girl and labeled her the direct killer of Lee Yu-hong. That night, Snow sat watching footage of the innocent girl on her phone. This wasn't Snow's style at all. She edited together a video showing Lee Yu-hong's death and broadcast it on the massive outdoor screens across the city, demanding justice for the wrongly accused. Far away, Inspector Coup also saw the video. She realized her battle with the faceless mastermind had only just begun. Meanwhile, the medical examiner was conducting the autopsy. When her assistant handed her a sausage as a joke, she frowned. "Who are you? What are you doing?" Inspector Coup ignored the nonsense and focused on her analysis. A man nearly 1.8 meters tall, supposedly killed by a fragile girl? The wounds were shallow, none deeper than 2 centimeters, not enough to be fatal. More importantly, there were no signs of resistance. Inspector Coup turned to examine the victim's organs, then donned a special headset. The hat concealed a microcamera, projecting images straight into her mind. Cross-checking with Chen Mo's intelligence, she confirmed the victim's body contained traces of 3 everyday chemicals: nanoso, ivlin, and cipibulin. Each alone was harmless, but together they were lethal. Nanoso dissolved in cooking oil, slipped into the man's French fries. Ivlin was volatile, inhaled when soap bubbles popped. Cipibulin dissolved invisibly in water, hidden in a water balloon. On top of this, the victim had a known sensitivity to aerosol sprays, which acted as a catalyst. It was clearly a premeditated assassination. From CCTV, Inspector Coup traced the setup to a man carrying the water balloon. Confronted, he claimed someone had only asked him to help. Searching his home, she found a black notebook. She remembered that the earlier victim's house had contained the same kind of notebook, clearly a communication tool for the killers. Moments after Inspector Coup left, the man snapped a secret photo of her and transmitted it to Snow through the organization. Looking at the image on her smartwatch, Snow's thoughts jumped back 2 years, to the night after Inspector Coup's colleague had died, when Inspector Coup herself had questioned her. Snow had recognized Inspector Coup as an unusually sharp woman, someone who could become her greatest threat. So Snow disguised herself as a low-level informant and infiltrated Inspector Coup's hidden base. She discovered a small task force had been assembled specifically to catch her. Amused, she laughed openly. Planting a bug inside a ceiling lamp, she almost escaped unnoticed, but Inspector Coup's assistant, Chin Mo, suddenly barged in. Later, a man struggled with a massive 300-pound water drum in the basement. Just as he failed to open it, a girl, Snow in disguise, crawled out of the barrel, swaggering past him with defiance. The air filled with the scent of perfume. At first the man was distracted by the sweetness, but then he remembered the real informant had once complained about stench clinging to her, saying perfume couldn't cover it. The scents didn't match. Suddenly he realized this wasn't their ally at all. He gave chase. Snow darted through corridors, quick and slippery, but she wasn't a trained runner. The pursuit lasted all night until she cornered herself. At the last moment, she hurled herself out of a second-story window, limping as she caught a passing bus to escape. Back at headquarters, Inspector Coup reviewed another of Snow's taunting videos with Chinemo. The footage was edited like a grim animation, insisting the arrested girl was innocent and the true killer was still free. The animation style itself was a clue, a rare stop-motion format from Seattle, suggesting Snow had grown up in America. Chen Mo reported what he had seen during the infiltration, confirming the imposter was a young woman, around 20, with an unusual scent, and most importantly, now nursing an injured leg from her escape. At that very moment, Snow was quietly eating at a street stall, smiling faintly at how obvious her limp must look. Back in the base, Chen Mo unscrewed the bugged lamp, dropped it into water, and destroyed the listening device. Over lunch, the team recharged on leek pies and rice. Inspector Coup suddenly paused mid-bite, struck by a thought. Perhaps in this world, there was only one person truly capable of standing on equal ground with her. On stage, the curtain began to rise. Snow was rehearsing with her team for a stage play. Her injured right leg slowed her movements, but her charm still captured the audience. Among them, Inspector Coup sat quietly with her phone, recording and observing. Inspector Coup cut straight to the point. "I remember you. You grew up in Seattle. Do you have anything you want to say to me?" Facing her former mentor, Snow pretended to be confused, feigning innocence. But she knew words were useless. Instead, she suddenly stood, strode across the stage, and leapt 3 meters down, landing right in front of Inspector Coup. Without hesitation, she grabbed Inspector Coup's arm and dragged her off in the direction of the setting sun. Seeing that her leg seemed normal, she dismissed her suspicions and left. But moments later, Snow collapsed against a wall, grimacing in pain. She shoved painkillers into her mouth. Beneath the surface of her performance, her heart darkened further. And now, Inspector Coup herself had become her top target to eliminate. A student named Seo Soo-jin had died, and her teacher, Park Hyun-woo, became the prime suspect. Inspector Coup confronted him, but before long, Park committed suicide. On the surface, Inspector Coup appeared expressionless. But her eyes were hollow, because the man who had just killed himself wasn't just a suspect. He was her husband. Years passed, yet Coup never truly recovered. Was her husband guilty and ended his own life out of shame? Or had he died because he couldn't bear his wife's suspicion? It remained an unsolved mystery. One night, Inspector Coup received a phone call. "I'm Chun Mo's wife," the caller said. "Killer K has contacted me again. She wants me to do something for her." K was planning another strike. The next day, they strapped Chun Mo's wife with trackers, microphones, and transmitters, then followed her by land, sea, and air. An old woman guided her to a designated spot. There, she picked up a phone, glanced at it once, and immediately panicked. She ripped off all the devices and fled to a seaside amusement park. There, she poured an unknown liquid into the children's pool. It was one of Kay's signature methods. Inspector Coup rushed forward, evacuating the kids. But the woman then raised the bottle and drained the rest herself. She whispered that she was only following orders. Then, looking at her daughter, she let go of her fear. The liquid turned out to be nothing but water. Kay had staged the entire act as a psychological trap. Meanwhile, Inspector Coup's allies, her sister, were ambushed inside their car. Poison gas was pumped in, sealing the doors and windows. They lost consciousness and woke up trapped inside a shipping container at sea. Coup realized it was a calculated move, a staged distraction to wipe out their whole team. Unless they solved the puzzle in 30 minutes, the outcome would be fatal. Elsewhere, Snow herself was framed. A stranger handed her a tissue, and moments later police arrived, accusing her of carrying contraband. Inside the tissue was a strange object. Snow protested her innocence, but her supposed ally had betrayed her. Arrested and sitting in a cell, she grew frustrated. She had set up the perfect trap, but couldn't watch it play out. At the same time, Chen Mo revved up his little motorbike, racing along the coast with Inspector Coup to track the missing container. Inside, water had already reached their friend's shoulders. Just when it seemed hopeless, Coup thought of one desperate solution: call the police. The Coast Guard arrived and rescued the two just in time. Later, Coup followed another lead to a group of old men playing chess. They swore they had seen a young woman, slim, 20 years old, smelling faintly of perfume, being arrested the day before. Inspector Coup's mind snapped to the same face: Snow. She was now certain. Snow was Killer K. Coup and Chen Mo broke into Snow's home. Searching every corner, they found a hidden box beneath the bed. Inside was a collection of black cloth dolls, undeniable proof. Just then, Snow's aunt walked in. She had bailed Snow out of custody and didn't believe her niece was guilty. To be sure, she searched through jars and cupboards, finding nothing. But when she glanced at the floor, she froze. The light of the moon revealed 2 extra pairs of shoes. Someone else was inside. Panicked, she shoved chili powder and pepper into her mouth in a bizarre attempt to stay alert. Then she turned and gasped. 2 strangers, a man and a woman, were standing in the room, smiling at her. She screamed. Inspector Coup pretended she had come to introduce a boyfriend to Snow. Since they had agreed to hang out that evening, Snow's aunt wasn't worried when Snow didn't return right away. Turning toward the fridge, she casually pointed at a photo and said Snow might have gone surfing at the beach. It sounded like a throwaway comment, but in fact, it became the key to unlocking the case. Just then, the aunt received a long-distance call. Her mother in the US was critically ill. She hurriedly packed, preparing to fly back. Inspector Coup realized Snow would also be leaving. This was the best chance to catch Killer K. She immediately informed her injured teammate. As the squad leader, the sister decided they had to notify their employer right away and prepare to close the net. At a temple, their employer, Madame Yong, was praying. She had 2 sons. The elder, Lee Cheonjiai, was running for mayor of Seoul, while the younger, Lee Manjiai, stayed out of the spotlight. Today she was praying for her eldest's political success, hoping to defeat his rival, Choi Kong-ryol. Madame Yong's plan was to first capture Killer K, build up her influence, and then remove her son's greatest obstacle. But word spread quickly. It turned out Inspector Coup's team had leaked the intel, and Killer K's movements were already exposed. Reinforcements were called in. Meanwhile, Snow had packed her suitcase after hearing about her grandmother's illness and was on her way to the airport. But Madame Yong had already arranged a trap there, deploying layers of security. While sipping her coffee, Madame Yong scolded a guard, asking if he was trying to poison her. The guard nervously attempted to cool her down, though not without adding his own seasoning. In the control room, Coup's sister was glued to the big screen, monitoring every signal. Sure enough, Snow's phone appeared inside the airport. Madame Yong smirked. "Got you." But when her men closed in, they found the phone hidden in a trash can. Furious, Madame Yong grabbed Coup's sister by the throat, demanding answers. Elsewhere, Snow herself was elated. She had learned that 50 operatives were mobilized just to catch her. She almost laughed with pride. But her arrogance was cut short when a large face suddenly appeared at the window, staring straight at her. Startled, Snow ducked into the corner, but their eyes met. "What are you looking at?" "You." And with that, the two women clashed, a frail 20-something against a battle-hardened 50-year-old inspector. Snow struck first with a flurry of blows, finishing with a vicious gut punch. But Inspector Coup countered with a judo throw. Realizing she was at a disadvantage, Coup grabbed a can of green spray paint, launching a messy counterattack. The damage was minimal, but the humiliation was severe. But Coup stalled her with words. "You don't kill innocents. You only kill those guilty of wasting air while alive and wasting land when dead." Snow paused. The words struck her. For a moment she felt understood. As a twisted gesture of gratitude, she drew out an enormous blade and aimed for Coup's arm. Before she could strike, Mo launched a desperate counter, forcing Snow to flee. She bolted, her youthful face masking her danger, turning the chase into a game of cat and mouse. She reached the shore, grabbed a surfboard, and paddled out. Despite Coup and Mo pursuing on a motorbike and boat, Snow escaped, diving into the Han River and vanishing beneath the current. Frustrated, the team regrouped at Snow's safe house, combing through her belongings for clues. Seeing Inspector Coup injured, her sister's heart ached. At that moment, a delivery arrived, a package containing yet another book. It was a graphic novel, St. Joan of Arc. Stacked among dozens of other comics, Coup realized these books weren't just for leisure, they contained secrets. Hugging the book tightly, she read for 3 days and nights, until she uncovered Snow's ultimate pattern. If you were a killer on the run, what would you take with you? Money? But this killer, barely in her 20s, had packed nothing but storybooks. That could only mean one thing. Her crimes were modeled after the tragedies she read. Coup flipped through them until the answer became clear. The first case, a security guard poisoned by wine. Exactly the same as the death of King Hamlet in Hamlet. The second case had been inspired by a scene tucked away in the comics. The clue came directly from the panel annotations. The third case, a sleazy man murdered by a cocktail of 4 chemical agents, mirrored another play almost exactly. In short, Snow's next murder method was hidden somewhere in the copy of St. Joan they'd just received. Inspector Coup read that book for 3 days and nights, hunting for the killer's modus operandi. Coup understood one thing clearly: although Snow had escaped, she would not leave the next target alone.